I'd been running loads up and down the Blue Ridge Parkway for nigh on 15 years. Ever since I left the coal mines behind after that cave-in, took my brother's leg and my patience with the dark. Trucking suited me better. Open roads, the hum of the engine like a steady heartbeat, and the mountains rolling by like old friends who'd seen better days. But those roads have a way of turning on you, especially come autumn when the leaves turn blood red and the fog creeps in from the valleys like smoke from a dying fire. It was late October, the air crisp with the promise of frost, and I was hauling a full trailer of seasoned lumber from Asheville up toward Boone. The kind of run where you don't see another soul for miles, just the twisty asphalt hugging the ridges, guardrails pitted with rust, and drop-offs that could swallow a rig whole if you weren't careful. That night started ordinary enough. I'd fueled up at a little mom-and-pop station just off the parkway, the kind with flickering neon and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. The attendant, an old-timer with a face like weathered bark, warned me about the weather rolling in. "Fog's gonna be thick as pea soup tonight, son. Watch them curves. Ain't no forgiveness in these hills." I nodded, tipped my hat, and climbed back into the cab of my old Kenworth, the seat worn smooth from years of my backside planted there. The dashboard clock glowed 10:47 p.m. as I shifted into gear, the diesel rumbling to life. Radio was tuned to some AM station out of Roanoke, playing scratchy bluegrass that cut in and out as the signal fought the terrain. I sipped my thermos of black coffee, strong enough to strip paint, and settled in for the haul. The parkway ain't like your interstates. It's narrower, wilder, with pullouts for tourists during the day, but empty as a grave at night. Trees crowd right up to the edge, oaks and maples shedding leaves that skittered across the road like restless spirits. I'd driven this stretch 100 times, knew every bend, every overlook where you could pull off and stare out at the endless folds of the Appalachians stretching into the dark. But as the miles ticked by, the fog started to build. At first, it was just wisps curling over the hood, but soon it thickened, turning my high beams into useless glows that bounced back at me. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet, the world shrinking to the yellow line in the center and the rumble strips on the shoulder. I slowed to 30, gripping the wheel tighter, the truck's tires humming a low warning on the damp pavement. It was around midnight when I saw him, or at least that's what the clock said later. I'd lost track staring into that gray nothingness. Up ahead, the fog parted just enough to reveal a silhouette on the right shoulder, arm extended, thumb jutting out like a challenge. Hitchhikers weren't unheard of on the parkway, especially near the trailheads where backpackers got stranded. But this late? In this soup? Something about it set my teeth on edge. He was standing stock still, not waving or pacing like most folks desperate for a ride. Just waiting, as if he knew I'd come along. I eased off the gas, debating. Truckers have an unwritten code. You don't leave a man stranded in the wild. Not with bears and bobcats prowling. Not with the cold seeping in. But I'd heard stories, too, whispered over diner counters. Folks vanishing on these roads, or worse, luring drivers into trouble. Still, I pulled over, air brakes hissing like a sigh of resignation. The trailer rocked gently as I came to a stop, and I leaned over to crank down the passenger window. He approached slow, materializing from the mist like he'd been part of it. Older guy, maybe 60s, with a face carved deep by time. High cheekbones, sunken eyes shadowed under a battered fedora that looked straight out of an old black and white photo. His clothes were outdated, too. A wool overcoat frayed at the cuffs, slacks that hung loose, and shoes caked in mud that didn't match the dry spell we'd had. No backpack, no gear, just him standing there in the damp. "Need a lift?" I called out, voice muffled by the fog. He nodded once, no words, and reached for the door handle. As he climbed in, our hands brushed accidental-like when I shifted the thermos out of the way. His skin was ice-cold, clammy, like he'd been wading in a creek. And the smell, faint but unmistakable, wet earth mixed with something older, like leaf mold in a forgotten cellar. It hit me wrong, but I chalked it up to the weather. He settled into the seat, staring straight ahead, hands folded in his lap. I waited a beat for him to say where he was headed, but nothing. Just the drip of condensation on the windshield and the engine idling. "Where to?" I asked finally, putting the truck back in gear. He muttered something low, sounded like next town over, but his voice was raspy, like gravel in a tin can. I nodded, figuring Boone or maybe blowing rock, and eased us back onto the road. The fog closed in again, thicker now, forcing me to crawl at 25. The radio, which had been fading in and out, went full static, hissing white noise that grated on my nerves. I fiddled with the dial, but every station was the same, like the mountains were blocking everything out. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, though the odometer said only 10 miles. My passenger didn't move, didn't fidget or clear his throat. Just sat there, eyes fixed on the gray veil ahead. To fill the quiet, I started talking, nervous habit from long hauls. Told him about the load I was carrying, how the lumber mills were slowing down with winter coming. He didn't respond, but I caught him glancing sideways now and then, like he was sizing me up. The cab felt colder with him in it, the heater blasting but not touching the chill. I rubbed my arms, wondering if the thermostat was acting up again. That's when he spoke, unprompted. "You got family back home, don't ya?" Wife named Sarah, 2 boys, Tommy and little Jake. My blood turned to ice. How the hell did he know that? I hadn't said a word about them. Sarah and I had been high school sweethearts in a little hollow near Wytheville. Tommy was 12, Jake 8, both with their freckles and my stubborn streak. I gripped the wheel harder, knuckles whitening. "How'd you know that?" I asked, voice steady as I could manage. He turned his head slow, that not-quite smile tugging at his lips. "Roads talk, son. They remember folks who've traveled them." His eyes, God, they were flat like pond water at dusk, no spark. I laughed it off, uneasy, said maybe I'd mentioned it earlier, though I knew I hadn't. But the questions kept coming, soft and probing. "Tommy still playing ball? Jake afraid of the dark like you were?" Details no stranger could know. My childhood fear of the mines, Sarah's maiden name. Panic started bubbling up, slow at first like sap in spring. The fog pressed in, the truck's lights barely cutting through. I glanced over to confront him, demand answers, but the seat was empty. Gone. Doors still locked from the inside, handle untouched. The cab was frigid now, my breath fogging the glass. I slammed on the brakes, the rig shuddering to a halt in the middle of the lane. No traffic to worry about out here. Heart hammering, I fumbled for the flashlight under the seat and shone around. No sign, no mud from his shoes, no indentation on the upholstery. Just the faint linger of that earthy smell, fading like a dream. I sat there a minute, engine rumbling, trying to make sense of it. Had I imagined him, picked up a ghost? The stories I'd heard flooded back. Old-timers talking about hitchhikers on the parkway, folks who died in wrecks decades ago, still thumbing for rides. But I wasn't one for superstitions. I'd seen enough real horrors in the mines to know fear had roots in the tangible. Shaking it off, I checked the rear view before pulling out. That's when I saw it, a shadow in the mist behind the trailer, humanoid, trailing at a distance. Not moving fast, just following. I floored it, the truck groaning in protest as I took the curves too sharp. Tires squealed, the trailer swaying, but I didn't care. The shadow kept pace for a mile or two, then dissolved into the fog as sudden as it appeared. I didn't stop until the next pullout, a wide spot with a view that was swallowed by gray. Stepping out, legs shaky, I circled the rig, flashlight beam dancing over the wet ground. No footprints where he'd climbed in, no scuffs on the step. Just the mud I'd tracked myself. The air was still, too still. No crickets, no wind rustling the leaves. I climbed back in, locked the doors and radio dispatch, but the static was back, thicker. Ended up driving straight through to Boone, arriving just as dawn broke the fog into harmless wisps. Delivered the load on autopilot, mind replaying every detail. At the truck stop, I asked around subtle-like, not wanting to sound crazy. An old driver, nursing his coffee, nodded slow. Seen that one before. Fella in old clothes, knows things he shouldn't. They say he wrecked back in '58, truck over the edge near Lynn Cove. Body never found. Some nights, he hitches, looking for company or maybe unfinished business. I didn't sleep much that week, holed up in my trailer outside Wytheville. Called Sarah more than usual, checked on the boys. But the road calls you back, bills don't pay themselves. First run after, I took the interstate, avoiding the parkway. Lasted a month before economics forced me back. Now, every fog bank I hit, I scan the shoulders, heart skipping. Is he out there waiting? Knowing my secrets, my fears? The mountains hold onto their dead, whispering through the mist. And sometimes, I swear, in the static on the radio, I hear his voice again, raspy, familiar, asking about my family like he never left. The quiet dread never fades. It's woven into these hills, a reminder that some rides end, but others, they just keep going, eternal in the gray. Let's move to story 2. I've been trucking along the Blue Ridge Parkway for what felt like a lifetime, ever since the mill shut down back in my hometown of Spruce Pine and left me scrambling for work that didn't involve choking on sawdust all day. The parkway was my lifeline, those winding ribbons of asphalt snaking through the Appalachians, flanked by ancient forests that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Spring rains had turned the world lush and muddy, the kind of wet that seeps into your bones and makes everything smell like fresh earth and decay. It was one of those evenings where the sky hung low, heavy with clouds that dumped a steady drizzle, turning the road into a slick mirror reflecting my headlights back at me. I was hauling a load of machine parts from Charlotte up to Roanoke, nothing glamorous, just enough to keep the bills paid and the coffee hot in my thermos. The drive had been uneventful so far, the kind I liked, solitary, with only the rhythmic thump of wipers and the occasional crackle of my CB radio for company. Tourists flocked to these overlooks during the day, posing for pictures with the misty valleys sprawling out like God's own quilt. But at night, especially in the rain, it's a different beast. Empty, echoing, with the wind moaning through the pines like a lament. I've been pushing hard, eyes heavy from the monotony, when the urge for a smoke hit me. There's a pullout about halfway through the stretch near Craggy Gardens, a wide gravel spot with a low stone wall overlooking the drop. I eased the rig off the road, tires crunching on wet pebbles, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the patter of rain on the cab roof and the distant gurgle of runoff trickling down the slopes. I stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the mud, and lit up a cigarette under the shelter of my jacket collar. The air was cool, laced with the scent of wet ferns and rhododendrons blooming wild along the edges. I leaned against the truck's fender, inhaling deep, watching the smoke curl up and mingle with the mist rising from the valley below. That's when I first noticed it. Not a sound at first, but a feeling like the weight of eyes on my back. I shook it off. These mountains play tricks on a man alone too long. But then came the whisper, soft, almost lost in the rain, drifting up from the embankment below the overlook. It wasn't words, not yet, just a murmur like someone talking in their sleep, faint and insistent. Curiosity's a curse for truckers. We've got too much time to think, too many miles to wonder about the what-ifs. I flicked the cigarette away, its ember hissing out in a puddle, and grabbed the heavy mag light from the cab. The beam cut through the drizzle like a knife, illuminating the steep slope dropping away from the road. Vines and underbrush choked the hillside, tangled masses of green that hid God knows what. I edged down carefully, boots slipping on the slick leaves, one hand gripping exposed roots for balance. The whisper grew a touch louder as I descended, pulling me like a thread. About 30 feet down, the flashlight caught something metallic glinting through the foliage. An old car wreck, half buried in the earth, vines snaking through its shattered windows like possessive fingers. It was an ancient thing, maybe a 60s model Ford or Chevy, rusted to hell and back, the body crumpled as if it had rolled down here in a bad skid. Doors hung ajar, one twisted off its hinges, and the roof caved in like a crushed can. No fresh tracks around it, no signs of recent disturbance, just the forest claiming it as its own, moss creeping over the hood, saplings sprouting through the floorboards. I'd heard tales of these forgotten crashes. The parkway's curves are unforgiving, and back before better guardrails, folks went over all the time. Some wrecks were never cleared, left to rot as warnings or oversights. I approached slow, flashlights sweeping the interior. Faded papers scattered across the seats, old maps, maybe receipts, yellowed and water-stained. No bodies, thank God, but an eerie stillness hung over it, thicker than the rain. The whisper was clearer now, emanating from inside, like a woman's voice, murmuring low and desperate. "Help, please, it's cold." My heart stuttered in my chest. I froze, beam locked on the driver's side. Was someone there? Hurt, trapped all these years. No, that couldn't be. The wreck was too old, too integrated into the hill. But the voice persisted, faint pleas weaving through the patter of rain on rusted metal. "Can't breathe. Help me." I leaned in closer, ignoring the rational part of my brain, screaming to climb back up. The air around the car was colder, unnaturally so, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. I reached out, hand hovering over the door frame, when something brushed my neck. A chill touch, light as a breath, but deliberate like fingers trailing skin. I spun around, flashlight whipping through the dark, heart pounding like a jackhammer. Nothing but swaying trees, rain-slicked trunks glistening in the beam. No one there, no animal scurrying away. Just the empty slope, the whisper now fading behind me. Panic clawed up my throat. I scrambled back up the embankment, boots churning mud, flashlight bobbing wildly. Thorn snagged my jeans, but I didn't care, just needed to get back to the truck, to the warmth of the cab. I yanked the door open and climbed in, slamming it shut, breath coming in ragged gasps. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the pullout, gravel spraying behind me. The radio, which I'd left on low, suddenly burst with static, loud, crackling interference that made me jump. Through it came cries, muffled but matching the voice from the wreck. "Help! Don't leave, it's so cold." I twisted the knob, trying to shut it off, but the static swelled, the pleas cutting in and out like a bad connection. "Please, come back." My hand shook on the wheel as I navigated the curves, rain sheeting the windshield, wipers struggling to keep up. In the rearview mirror, something flickered, distant lights, like headlights, piercing the gloom, trailing me from the overlook. Not another vehicle. The parkway was deserted this late. These were erratic, winking in and out, closing the gap, then falling back like a ghost in pursuit. I floored the accelerator, the truck groaning around bends, trailers swaying dangerously. The radio wailed on, the woman's voice growing frantic, personal now. "Why did you leave me? It hurts." Miles blurred by, the lights persisting in the mirror, a silent chase through the downpour. I radioed on the CB, voice cracking. "Anyone out there? Got some weird shit going on near Craggy." But only static answered, laced with those echoes. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill seeping into the cab. Finally, as the road straightened near a ranger station, closed and dark, the lights faded, dissolving into the rain. The radio snapped back to normal, some late-night talk show droning about weather patterns. I pulled over at the next safe spot, a wide shoulder near a trailhead, and killed the engine again. Sat there, hands trembling, staring into the dark. No sign of pursuit, just the steady drum of rain. That night stuck with me, burrowing deep like a splinter you can't dig out. I made it to Roanoke by dawn, delivered the load on autopilot, mind replaying every whisper, every flicker. At a greasy spoon diner, I asked around, subtle, not wanting to sound off my rocker. An old park ranger, sipping coffee, nodded grimly. "That stretch? Folks say there's a wreck from 72. Woman driving alone in a storm went over the edge. Search parties found the car, but no body. Some nights, they hear her calling out. Unfinished business, maybe." He shrugged, like it was just another mountain tale. I didn't laugh it off. Drove back south on the interstate, avoiding the parkway for weeks. But trucking routes don't care about ghosts. Eventually, I had to take it again. Now, every rainy evening, every pullout I pass, I listen for those whispers. The forests hold secrets, cradling the lost in their roots and vines. And sometimes, in the quiet after a storm, I wonder if she's still down there, pleading, pulling at the edges of the living world with her quiet sorrow. The unrest doesn't end with the drive. It follows you home, echoing in the rain on your roof, reminding you that some stories don't crash. They linger unfinished in the hollows of these hills. Let's move to story 3. Winter had a way of clamping down on the Blue Ridge Parkway like an iron fist, turning the winding roads into treacherous ribbons of ice and shadow. I've been driving these routes for over a decade, ever since the factory in my hometown of Galax shuttered and left me with few options but the open road. Trucking paid the bills, kept me moving, but in the dead of winter, it felt more like a sentence than a job. The snow came in flurries that night. Light at first, dancing in the high beams like restless moths, but building into a veil that blurred the line between sky and mountain. I was hauling a load of auto parts from Knoxville up to Lynchburg, the kind of run where you pray the chains on your tires hold and the heater doesn't quit. The cab was my cocoon, warm air blasting from the vents, coffee steaming in a travel mug, and an old country station crackling faintly on the radio, songs about lost love echoing off the dashboard. The Parkway ain't built for speed. It's a scenic byway, meant for summer tourists gawking at the vistas, but in January, it's a ghost town. No streetlights, just the occasional reflector post glinting like wary eyes. Trees loomed on either side, skeletal branches heavy with snow, reaching out as if to snag the trailer. I'd passed the last pull-out hours ago, the world narrowing to the beam of my lights cutting through the white. Fatigue tugged at me. Long hauls do that, turning your mind to mush, but I pushed on, sipping coffee, humming along to drown the isolation. That's when I spotted him, near a remote trailhead marked by a weathered sign half buried in drifts. A young guy, maybe early 20s, standing on the shoulder with his thumb out. Bundled in a thin jacket that looked more city than mountain. No hat, no gloves, just hunched against the wind. His face was pale in the headlights, eyes hollow, like he'd been walking for days and seen things that hollowed him out. Hitchhikers weren't common this far out, especially in a blizzard brewing, but the code of the road nagged at me. You don't leave a soul stranded in these hills. The cold kills quicker than kindness regrets. I slowed the rig, air brakes sighing, and leaned over to pop the passenger door. He climbed in without a word, just pointed ahead down the road, as if that said everything. I nodded, figuring he was headed to the next town, maybe Blowing Rock or even further. Rough night to be out, I said, shifting into gear. He didn't reply, just stared straight, breath fogging the window. The cab filled with an odd silence after that, broken only by the hum of tires on icy pavement and the occasional groan of the truck as it labored up inclines. I glanced at him a few times, skinny kid, dark hair matted with snow melt, eyes fixed on the dark ahead. No backpack, no gear. He could have been a runaway or a hiker caught out. The smell of wet wool and something sharper like fierce sweat hung in the air. We drove like that for miles, the snow thickening, forcing me to drop speed to 20. The radio faded to static, the signal lost in the ridges, leaving us with the wind's low howl outside. I tried small talk to cut the tension. Where you from? Got family waiting. But he shook his head, lips pressed tight, like words were a luxury he couldn't afford. His hands fidgeted in his lap, knuckles white. The quiet gnawed at me. I'm used to solitude, but this felt different, heavier, like the mountains were pressing in. About 10 miles in, he started glancing back, subtle at first, a twitch of the head toward the side mirror, then more insistent, craning his neck to peer into the black behind us. His breathing quickened, shallow puffs visible in the cab's chill. Something wrong? I asked, voice low to not spook him further. He shook his head again, but his eyes darted, wide with something I couldn't place. Fear, maybe, or warning. I checked my own mirrors, seeing nothing but swirling snow and the faint red glow of my taillights fading into the night. The road twisted ahead, guardrails dusted white, drop-offs plunging into unseen voids. The kid's glances grew frantic every few seconds now, body rigid. Unease settled in my gut, slow and cold, like the frost creeping up the windshield edges. You see something back there? I pressed, slowing a bit. He didn't answer, just kept staring. Then, in the side mirror, I caught it, a pair of eyes reflecting in the dark, low to the ground, maybe 3 feet off the pavement. Not deer eyes, which glow green and scatter. These were steady, watchful orbs in the shadows, tracking us with unnatural patience. Too close together for a bear, too deliberate for any animal I'd hunted in these woods. They blinked once, twice, then vanished as we rounded a bend. My heart kicked up a notch. What the hell was that? I muttered, more to myself. The kid finally spoke, voice barely audible over the wind whistling through the door seals. "They're coming." 2 words, raspy and flat, like he'd rehearsed them in his head. Panic flickered in his eyes, real and raw. I laughed it off, nervous, like, "Who's coming? Ain't nobody out here but us in the snow." But my hands tightened on the wheel. The truck stuttered then, engine faltering without reason, RPM needle dipping wild. No warning lights, no smoke, just a cough, like something choked the fuel line. I pumped the gas, cursing under my breath as the rig slowed on an uphill. The kid bolted, door flying open, cold blasting in, him vanishing into the woods without a backward glance. "Hey, wait," I yelled, but he was gone, swallowed by the trees and flurries. Alone now, the cab felt exposed, wind howling through the open door until I slammed it shut. The engine caught again, rumbling back to life, but that unease had rooted deep. I checked the mirrors. Those eyes were back, closer now, gleaming in the red taillight wash. Multiple pairs? Hard to tell in the swirl, but they paced us low and steady, shadows shifting just beyond the light's edge. Not animals. The way they moved felt wrong, purposeful, like they were hurting. My skin crawled, breath coming short. I revved the engine, pushing through the drift, tires spinning for grip on the ice. The eyes drew nearer, reflections bobbing, until one pair flared bright in the beam as I swung wide on a curve. No body visible, just those orbs hanging in the dark like accusations. Part of my throat, I floored it, the truck groaning around turns, trailer fishtailing. They kept pace for a harrowing mile, then faded as I crested a ridge, lights winking out one by one. I didn't stop until dawn broke weak and gray over the next diner, a ramshackle joint off the parkway with fogged windows and the smell of grease. Parked the rig, legs shaky as I stumbled in for coffee. The place was empty save for a few locals, old men in flannel, nursing mugs, eyes squinting at the stranger. I sat at the counter, hands wrapped around hot ceramic, and after a bit, mentioned the kid, the eyes casual-like. The waitress paused mid-pour, glancing at the others. One grizzled fella, face like cracked leather, leaned in. "Watchers," he whispered, voice graveled by years of tobacco. "From the old mining days. Tunnels collapsed back in the 30s, trapped folks down there. Some say they ain't all dead. Changed, maybe, living feral in the hollows guard their territory, worn off intruders with them eyes in the night." The others nodded, murmuring about disappearances, hikers gone missing, trucks found empty. I left unsettled, the story burrowing in like frostbite. Drove the rest of the way on edge, scanning the tree leans. That glance the kid gave before bolting, it was a warning, clear as day now, one I ignored at my peril. The parkway's isolation breeds such quiet terrors, where silence speaks louder than screams. Back home, I tried shaking it, but nights bring the dreams. Eyes in the dark, following, waiting. Every winter run, I wonder if they're out there still, those watchers from forgotten depths, patient in the snow. The mountains don't forget they're dead. They just hide them, letting the dread linger in the wind, unresolved, pulling at the edges of your sanity like branches in the night. Story 4. The humidity hung thick in the air that summer night, like a wet blanket smothering the Blue Ridge Parkway, turning every breath into a labored draw. I've been behind the wheel of my old Freightliner for 12 hours straight, hauling a load of steel coils from Greenville up to Charlottesville, the kind of cargo that made the trailer groan on every incline. These mountain roads were my bread and butter, twisting paths carved into the Appalachians, where the trees pressed close like silent watchers, and the only company was the occasional deer frozen in your headlights. But midnight brought a different feel. The world narrowed to the glow of your dash, and the endless black ahead, humidity beating on the windshield despite the AC wheezing full blast. I wiped sweat from my brow, sipping lukewarm coffee from a stained thermos, trying to shake the fog of fatigue that came with these long hauls. My name's Earl, been trucking since the Army spit me out after Desert Storm, and these hills felt like home, unforgiving but familiar. The Parkway ain't like the interstates. No billboards, no rest stops with neon glows, just pullouts and overlooks where tourists gape at the views by day. At night, especially in July's sticky grip, it's a lonely stretch, the air buzzing with cicadas and the distant rumble of thunder that never quite arrives. I'd passed the last sign of civilization miles back, a shuttered ranger station with its lot empty under the moon. The radio was tuned to some AM station out of Asheville, crackling bluegrass that cut in and out as the signal bounced off the ridges. I hummed along half-heartedly, eyes scanning the curves, when something caught in the rearview mirror. Indistinct shapes darting behind the trailer, quick flashes of movement, like figures slipping through the tree line. At first, I blinked it away, chalking it up to the long hours, the way your mind plays tricks when the caffeine wears thin. Get a grip, Earl, I muttered, adjusting the mirror. Probably just shadows from the overhanging branches, or maybe a coon scampering across the road. But they persisted. As the rig lumbered through another tight turn, the shapes reappeared, humanoid silhouettes, weaving in and out of the underbrush, never quite catching up but always there, pacing me at the edge of visibility. Not deer. Too upright, too deliberate in their motion. I slowed a touch, peering harder, but the humidity fogged the glass, blurring everything into a hazy mess. Heart picking up a beat, I grabbed the CB mic and keyed it. Breaker, this is Iron Hauler northbound on the Parkway, near mile 300. Anyone copy? Got some weird activity back here. Static roared back, drowning the call. No voices cutting through. Just white noise hissing like a nest of snakes. I tried again, switching channels, but the isolation hit hard. These mountains swallow signals like they do secrets. Alone in the cab, the engine's rumble my only anchor. I felt the first twinge of unease settle in my gut, slow and insistent. The shapes didn't let up. Every glance in the mirror showed them. 3, maybe 4, slipping between trees, their forms indistinct but purposeful, like they were tracking the truck without closing in. The road twisted sharper here, cliffs rising on one side, drop-offs yawning on the other, guardrails bent from past mishaps. Sweat trickled down my back, sticking my shirt to the seat. I cracked the window for air, but the humidity rushed in, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. No other vehicles passed. It was just me, the rig, and whatever lurked in the dark. Fatigue? Hallucinations from too many energy drinks? I rubbed my eyes, but when I looked again, they were closer, edging the shoulder now, silhouettes that mimicked human gait but moved with an unnatural fluidity. Panic bubbled low, but I pushed it down, been in tighter spots overseas after all. Up ahead, a rest area loomed. A wide gravel pullout with a picnic table chained to the ground and a trash bin overflowing from weekend hikers. I eased the truck off the road, tires crunching over loose stones, and killed the engine. The sudden quiet was oppressive, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and the distant chirp of night insects. Grabbing my flashlight, a heavy-duty one with fresh batteries, I stepped out, boots hitting the gravel with a soft thud. The air was warmer outside, sticky, wrapping around me like an unwanted embrace. I swept the beam behind the trailer, light cutting through the haze, illuminating twisted trunks and ferns dripping with moisture. Nothing. No figures, no tracks in the soft earth along the shoulder. "Hello," I called out, voice echoing off the trees, sounding smaller than I intended. Silence answered, thick and mocking. Then, a crunch, footsteps nearby, deliberate and close like someone circling just beyond the light's reach. I spun, beam whipping through the woods, heart thudding. Branches rustled, but no one there. Just shadows dancing in the periphery. Unease turning to dread, I circled the rig, flashlight probing the undercarriage, the wheel wells. Still nothing. The footsteps faded, but the feeling lingered, like eyes boring into my back. Climbing back into the cab, I slammed the door, locking it out of habit. That's when I saw it. A handprint smeared on the passenger window, too large for human, fingers elongated and splayed, pressing from the outside. It hadn't been there before. I'd cleaned the glass at the last fuel stop. As I watched, frozen, it faded slow, like breath on a mirror dissipating, leaving no trace but a faint streak. My mouth went dry, coffee turning sour in my stomach. "What the hell?" I whispered, starting the engine with shaking hands. The rig roared to life, and I pulled out fast, gravel spitting behind. Driving on, the shadows returned, multiplied now, more silhouettes darting in the mirrors, mimicking my turns as if herding me along the winding path. They wove closer, brushing the tree-line, their forms hazy in the humid night. Dread built slowly, like the fog creeping up from the valleys, rolling over the hood in tendrils that obscured the road. Whispers filtered through the vents, unintelligible but urgent, like voices from a bad dream, murmuring warnings from the past. Not words I could make out, just a low susurrus that raised the hairs on my arms. The AC blasted cold, but sweat poured down my face. I pushed the speed, ignoring the curve's dangers, tires squealing on the damp asphalt, trailers swaying like it might jackknife. The shapes kept pace, relentless, their presence a quiet hunt that gnawed at my nerves. No attacks, no overt threats, just the unrelenting pursuit, the sense of being followed by what you can't confront. Miles blurred, the parkway's twists a nightmare of fog and shadow. I keyed the CB again, desperate. "Mayday, anyone out there?" Being tailed on the parkway. But static swallowed it whole. The whispers grew, seeping into the cab like the humidity, urgent pleas or threats I couldn't decipher. In the rear view, the figures multiplied further, a silent procession mirroring my path. Panic crested slow, a wave building offshore. I floored it through a straightaway, engines straining, praying for dawn. The sky lightened gradually, gray bleeding into the east, and as the first rays pierced the fog, the shadows dissolved, one by one, melting into the trees like mist burned away. I didn't stop until a truck stop outside Charlottesville, pulling in with trembling limbs, the rig shuddering to a halt. That night changed everything. I holed up in a motel for days, replaying it, questioning my sanity. Back home in Galax, I researched, dug through old forums, library archives on Appalachian lore. Stories surfaced, vanished truckers on that stretch, rigs found empty, doors locked from inside, no signs of struggle. Locals whispered of shadows in the hills, remnants from old logging camps or mining disasters, folks lost to the wild who lingered as echoes, patient pursuers in the night. No monsters, just the unrest of the forgotten, hurting the living as they once were hurted. I tried laughing it off, but the dread clings, a quiet sorrow that follows me on every run. Now, glancing in the rear view brings a chill, even on clear days. The parkway's mirrors reflect more than the road behind. They reveal the unseen, the unresolved, pulling at you with their silent hunt. And sometimes, in the humid hush of summer midnights, I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for the fog to roll in again. Their whispers a reminder that some pursuits never end. They just fade with the light, biding time in the hollows. Story 5. Fall had always been my favorite time on the Blue Ridge Parkway, when the leaves turned to flames of orange and red, carpeting the winding roads like a patchwork quilt thrown over the mountains. I've been trucking these routes for nearly 20 years, ever since I traded the cramped confines of a factory job in Boone for the open cab on my Peterbilt. The pay wasn't great, but the solitude suited me. Miles of asphalt hugging the ridges, with only the hum of the engine and the occasional hawk circling overhead for company. My name's Harlan, and these Appalachian hills are my blood. My granddaddy logged them back when the forest seemed endless, and my daddy hauled coal until the mines dried up. But that dawn in late October, as fog rolled in thick from the valleys, something shifted. The air had that crisp bite, laced with the scent of decaying leaves and wood smoke from distant cabins. But underneath it lurked a quiet unease, like the mountains were holding their breath. I was running a load of furniture from Asheville up to Roanoke, nothing out of the ordinary, just dressers and tables strapped tight in the trailer. The night had been clear at first, stars pinpricking the sky like scattered buckshot. But as the hours wore on, the fog crept in, turning the world into a hazy dream. My headlights barely pierced it, casting ghostly beams that illuminated twisting guardrails and the sheer drops beyond. I'd slowed to a crawl, tires whispering on the damp pavement, the rig's engine a low growl echoing off the rock faces. Coffee from my thermos kept me alert, bitter and hot, but fatigue tugged at the edges of my vision. The parkway's not for the faint-hearted at night. No shoulders in places, just narrow lanes flanked by dense woods where deer, or worse, could bolt out unexpected. I'd seen my share of wrecks. Mangled cars fished from ravines, their stories lost to the mist. It was just before dawn, the sky a bruised purple, when I spotted it. An old semi parked crookedly on a rare wide shoulder. Lights off, no flares or triangles set out. It looked like a relic, maybe an 80s model Mac or International, paint faded to a dull red under layers of grime. The trailer was gone, just a tractor sitting there like it had been abandoned mid-haul. Concern mixed with curiosity. Breakdowns happen out here, engines seizing or tires blowing, leaving drivers stranded in the cold. But this felt off. No smoke, no hood popped, and in this fog, a man could freeze waiting for help. I eased my rig behind it, leaving space, and gave a couple blasts on the air horn. The sound echoed sharp through the mist, bouncing off the trees, but silence answered. No figure emerging, no lights flickering on. The quiet pressed and heavier, broken only by the idling of my own engine and the distant drip of condensation from overhanging branches. I sat there a minute debating. Truckers look out for each other. It's an unwritten rule in these isolated stretches. If he was hurt or passed out, leaving him could weigh on me later. Grabbing my flashlight and a tire iron, just in case, I stepped out. The fog wrapped around me immediate, clammy and thick, muting my footsteps on the gravel. The air smelled of wet earth and rust, with an undercurrent of diesel long gone stale. As I approached the old semi, boots crunching softly, a chill prickled my skin despite the flannel shirt under my jacket. The cab door was ajar, creaking slightly in the faint breeze, like an invitation I hadn't asked for. I shone the light inside. Pristine yet dusty, the kind of contradiction that sets your nerves on edge. The seats were worn leather, cracked with age, but no trash, no coffee cups, just a layer of fine dust coating the dash like it had sat untouched for years. Papers scattered on the passenger seat caught my eye. Old logbooks, yellowed and brittle. Entries dated back to the 90s. Hulls of timber through these same mountains, signatures faded but legible. A chill ran through me, slow and deep, like ice water in my veins. Who leaves logs like that? And how had this rig sat here without rangers towing it? The parkway's maintained. Abandoned vehicles don't linger. I leaned in further, flashlight beam dancing over the gauges. Needle on empty, keys still in the ignition, rusted over. That's when I heard it, a faint engine rumble, not mine ticking away behind, but from within this relic. Low and throaty, like a diesel idling just out of sight. My heart stuttered. I glanced back at my truck, its lights cutting through the fog, engine steady. The sound grew, vibrating through the cab floor, impossible but real. Curiosity turned to unease. I climbed up into the driver's seat for a better look, the door creaking shut behind me. The seat was warm, like someone had just stepped away moments ago, the leather holding body heat that shouldn't be there. Dust puffed up as I settled, and the rumble intensified, the whole cab humming faintly. I froze, hand hovering over the dash. The radio, an old CB model, antenna wire-frayed, crackled to life unbidden. Static hissed, then a voice cut through mid-sentence. "Help! They're here." A man's voice, strained and desperate, trailing off into white noise. No channel light on, no power that I could see, but the words hung in the air, echoing in my head. "Who's there?" I whispered, voice hoarse, but only static answered, popping like distant gunfire. Outside, the mist thickened sudden, swirling in eddies that blurred the trees into vague shapes. Humanoid, almost shifting just beyond the beam of my forgotten flashlight on the floor. Tall figures, indistinct, weaving through the fog like smoke, not approaching but encircling, patient. My breath came shallow. This wasn't right. None of it. Panic clawed up slow, a building wave. I bolted from the cab, door banging open, feet hitting gravel hard. The shapes in the mist seemed to pause, watching as I sprinted back to my rig. I yanked my door open, climbed in, and slammed it shut, locking it futile. The engine roared as I shifted gears, pulling away fast, trailer rocking. In the rear view, the abandoned semi's lights flickered on, headlights piercing the fog, yellowed and dim, like eyes waking from sleep. It didn't move at first, just sat there illuminated, but as I rounded the next curve, it followed at a distance, lights bobbing in the mirror. Heart pounding, I accelerated, the fog parting reluctant before my beams. The old rig kept pace, not gaining but persistent, its silhouette hazy in the dawn light filtering through. For hours it trailed, through twists and tunnels, over viaduct where the drop-offs plunged hundreds of feet. I radioed dispatch, voice cracking, got a ghost on my tail out here. Old semi following, no driver. But static drowned me out, the same hissing from that cursed radio. Whispers seeped in now, faint through my vents. Murmurs like the voice I'd heard, urgent but indistinct, pleading or warning. The sun rose slow, burning off the fog in patches, but the trailing lights didn't fade. Sweat soaked my shirt, hands slick on the wheel. Every glance back showed it there, a relic from another time, echoing my path. Panic built to dread, the kind that sinks into your bones. Was it mechanical? A prank? Or something the mountains held on to, unwilling to let go? Miles ticked by, the parkway's beauty turned sinister, trees crowding like silent judges. Finally, as I crossed the state line into Virginia, the lights winked out, gone in an instant. No rig in sight when I pulled over at the first overlook, legs shaky as I scanned the empty road behind. No tire tracks in the soft shoulder, no exhaust plume, just the quiet dawn, birds starting their calls as if nothing happened. I made the delivery in Roanoke on autopilot, mind replaying every detail, the warm seat, the voice, those swirling shapes. At a dingy truck stop diner, nursing black coffee, I asked around subtle-like. Locals, grizzled men with calloused hands and knowing eyes, nodded slow. That old red Mac? Wrecked back in '94, they say. Driver hauling logs, lost control in fog. Went over the edge near your spot. Body recovered, but the rig vanished. Folks see it now and then, echoing through time like the mountains ain't done with him. One old-timer leaned in, voice low. He was running from something, debts or worse. Calls for help on the radio, but too late. Now it pulls others in unfinished journeys and all. I didn't scoff. The dread clung, a quiet weight. Drove home to my empty trailer in the hollows, but sleep came fitful, dreams of trailing lights and whispers in the mist. Back on the road weeks later, every parked vehicle whispers possibilities now. The past intruding, remnants of lives stalled forever in those hills. The parkway's echoes aren't just sounds. They're the unrest of the lost, lingering in the fog, drawing you into their eternal hall. And sometimes in the rear view at dawn, I swear I see those lights again, patient, waiting for the mist to thicken once more, pulling at the edges of what I thought was real. Story 6. The moonless sky over the Blue Ridge Parkway that night felt like a heavy shroud, pressing down on the twisting road and swallowing any hint of light from the stars. I've been hauling freight for close to a decade, running loads of whatever paid the bills, lumber, machine parts, even livestock once, from Knoxville up through the Appalachians to points north. My old Mack truck was my constant companion, its cab a cluttered sanctuary of coffee stains, dog-eared maps, and a radio that picked up ghost signals from stations long gone silent. My name's Silas, born and raised in a hollow near Burnsville where the mountains cradle you tight, teaching you early that isolation ain't always peaceful. These roads were my escape after the mill closed and took half the town with it, but they had a way of reminding you that the wild never fully lets go. That particular run was routine. A trailer full of crated appliances bound for Richmond. The air crisp with the promise of early frost, leaves rustling like whispers in the dark. The parkway stretches like a vein through the heart of these hills, narrow and unforgiving, with dense woods flanking both sides. Oaks and pines so thick they block out the world beyond. No billboards, no rest areas with buzzing vending machines. Just pullouts carved into the rock, overlooks where tourists gawk by day but vanish come nightfall. I'd left the depot around dusk, fueled up on black coffee and jerky, the engine's steady rumble lulling me into that familiar trance of long-haul driving. The headlights cut twin beams through the black, illuminating curves that hugged cliffs on one side and plunged into shadowed valleys on the other. Animals stirred now and then, a raccoon's eyes flashing green, a deer bolting across, but tonight the wildlife seemed hushed, as if holding back. I cracked the window for fresh air, the chill seeping in with the scent of pine resin and damp earth, grounding me against the fatigue creeping in after hours behind the wheel. It started subtle, that feeling of prickling on the back of my neck like hairs standing on end from a static charge. At first, I shrugged it off. Truckers get jumpy on empty roads, minds wandering to old stories swapped over diner counters. But it persisted, that sense of being observed, eyes boring into me from the dense woods. I adjusted the side mirrors, scanning the tree-line, but saw only shadows dancing in the slipstream. The radio droned some late-night talk show, voices fading in and out as the signal fought the terrain, but even that felt distant, like eavesdropping on another world. I sipped my coffee, now lukewarm, and turned up the volume, trying to drown the unease. Miles ticked by, the odometer clicking like a metronome, each turn revealing more of the same. Endless forest, guardrails pitted with rust, and the occasional reflector post winking back. Then, glancing out the passenger window, I caught them, pinpricks of light hovering among the branches, not the erratic glow of fireflies, too late in the season for that, but steady, unblinking gazes. Two at first, low in the underbrush, reflecting my headlights with an unnatural sheen. Not animal eyes. I'd hunted these hills as a boy, knew the green glint of deer or the yellow of coyotes. These are different, too intelligent, too patient, holding steady as the truck rolled past. I slowed a bit, peering harder, but the lights vanished behind a bend, only to reappear further along, multiplied now. For then six scattered through the trees, pacing me at the edge of visibility. My heart picked up, a slow thrum matching the engine's idle. Just reflections, I muttered, rubbing my eyes, blaming the long hours. But they kept pace as miles passed, weaving through the foliage like silent sentinels, never closing in, but always there, watching. The road climbed higher, the air thinning, fog wisps curling from the valleys below. The feeling intensified, that prickling turning to a crawl under my skin, as if the observers were peeling back layers, seeing more than just a trucker hauling freight. I sped up, the trailer swaying slightly on the curves, tires humming louder on the asphalt. The lights multiplied further, dozens now, clustered in pairs, dotting the tree line like stars fallen to earth. No animals move like that, coordinated and relentless. Panic simmered low, not explosive but building like water heating to a boil. I grabbed the CB mic, keying it with a thumb that felt numb. Breaker, this is Freight Runner on the parkway north of mile 250. Anyone copy? Feeling watched out here. Static crackled back, thick and unresponsive, no friendly voice cutting through. The radio in the dash went silent too, the talk show swallowed by white noise, leaving only the wind's low moan through the cracked window. Up ahead, a pullout emerged, a wide gravel shoulder with a low stone wall overlooking the drop. I eased the rig off the road, brakes hissing, the truck rocking to a stop. Killing the engine plunged the world into quiet, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I sat there a moment, breath fogging the glass, staring into the dark woods across the lane. The lights were there still, hovering, patient, grabbing my spotlight. A heavy beast with a beam that could cut through night like a knife. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The air was colder here, carrying the faint tang of wood smoke from some far-off cabin, but no warmth in it. I swept the light across the tree-line, beam piercing the underbrush, revealing twisted trunks, ferns, and fallen logs slick with dew. Nothing. No eyes, no movement, just rustling leaves settling back into place. Yet the feeling amplified, a weight on my chest, like the air itself was alive with scrutiny. I called out, voice echoing hollow. "Who's there?" "This ain't funny." Silence swallowed the words, but then came the whispers, soft at first, rustling like wind through pines, but forming shapes, murmurs that teased the edge of comprehension. My name drifted in Silas, faint but clear, followed by details from my life. Burnsville boy, mill closed, wife left. My blood ran cold. How could they know? No one out here, no pranksters in these remote stretches. The whispers grew, overlapping, urgent but unintelligible, pulling at memories I'd buried deep. The divorce papers served at the depot, the empty house waiting back home. Panic set in proper now, heart pounding as I backed toward the truck, spotlight swinging wild. The beam caught something, a figure stepping briefly into the light, tall and gaunt, clothed in rags that blended with the bark, face obscured but eyes reflecting back, steady and knowing. It vanished before clarity, melting into the shadows like it had never been. I bolted for the cab, slamming the door, locking it with fumbling hands. The truck shuddered then, as if brushed by unseen hands. A slight rock, metal groaning under pressure. I twisted the key, engine roaring to life, and peeled out, gravel spraying. In the mirrors, the lights reappeared, clustering thicker, pacing as I accelerated. The whispers filtered through the vents now, muffled but persistent, murmuring secrets I'd told no one. The road twisted ahead, fog thickening, forcing me to navigate by feel more than sight. No attacks came, no figures lunging, just that unrelenting gaze, unraveling my sense of solitude mile by mile. The truck labored up inclines, trailer heavy, but I pushed it, ignoring the dangers of the curves. Hours blurred, the sky lightening imperceptibly in the east, dawn's gray fingers creeping over the ridges. As the first light touched the treetops, the eyes dimmed, winking out one by one, whispers fading to the wind's natural sigh. By full morning, they were gone, leaving only the ordinary woods, birds calling as if nothing had stirred. I didn't stop until a truck stop diner outside Lynchburg, pulling in with hands still trembling on the wheel. The place was a haven of fluorescent lights and grease smells. Old-timers hunched over plates of eggs and hash. I slid into a booth, coffee steaming untouched, and after a bit, mentioned it casual-like to the waitress refilling my mug. She paused, glancing at the regulars. One grizzled fella, cap pulled low, leaned over from the counter. "Watchers," he said, voice graveled by cigarettes and years. "Remnants of forgotten folk, old settlers, miners run off the land, living feral in the deep woods. Guard their territory with silent vigilance, eyes in the night. Don't attack, just observe. Drive a man mad, knowing you're never alone." The others nodded, sharing tales of hikers vanished, drivers quitting routes after similar nights. "Mountains hold onto their own," he added, echoes of lives pushed aside. I laughed at weak, but the dread remained, a quiet anchor in my chest. Delivered the load on autopilot, mind replaying those eyes, those whispers. Back home in Burnsville, the empty house felt watched, shadows in the corners stirring unease. I rerouted my hauls after that, sticking to interstates where lights and traffic drown the wild. But the pull of the parkway lingers. Economics drag me back now and then. Every moonless night, that prickling returns, eyes imagined in the tree line. The Appalachians hide more than wildlife. They conceal observers, patient and unseen, unraveling your solitude with their quiet stares. No confrontations, just the unnerving reality that in these shadowed paths, you're never truly alone. The watchers wait, murmuring truths you'd rather forget. their vigil a sorrow that clings like fog in the hollows. Story 7. The storm hit hard that night on the Blue Ridge Parkway, rain slamming against the cab like fists on a door you don't want to open. I've been driving these mountain roads for over a decade, ever since the lumber yard back in my hometown of Wytheville laid me off and left me scrambling for work that kept me moving. Trucking suited my restless nature. Long hauls through the Appalachians, where the ridges rise like ancient spines and the valleys hide secrets in their folds. My rig was an old Volvo, reliable but worn, its engine a constant growl that drowned out the loneliness most nights. That evening, I was hauling a load of construction supplies from Charlotte up to Roanoke. Nothing fancy, just rebar and cement bags strapped tight against the weather. The forecast had warned of thunderstorms rolling in from the west, but I'd pushed on, figuring I could outrun the worst of it. By midnight, though, the sky had unleashed hell, sheets of water blurring the windshield, wipers thrashing uselessly against the deluge. The parkway ain't designed for comfort. It's a scenic route by day, with overlooks where folks pull off to snap pictures of the misty vistas, but at night, especially in a downpour, it's a beast. Narrow lanes twist without mercy, guardrails slick and untrustworthy, and the woods crowd close, branches whipping in the wind like they're reaching out. I'd slowed to 30, headlights reflecting off the wet asphalt, creating illusions of movement in the periphery. The cab was my bubble, heater blasting to fight the chill seeping through the seals, coffee steaming in a travel mug clamped in the console. My CB radio was on, tuned to channel 19, the trucker's lifeline, but tonight it was quiet, just the occasional burst of static as lightning cracked overhead. Thunder rolled through the valleys like distant artillery, shaking the rig. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles pale, focusing on the yellow line snaking ahead. That's when the distress call cut through. The CB crackled to life, loud and desperate amid the storm's roar. Breaker, breaker. This is Lone Wolf at mile 217. Breakdown, engine shot. Something's out here. Need help, over. The voice was male, strained, laced with fear that punched through the static. I was near there, mile 215 by my reckoning, so I grabbed the mic, thumb pressing the key. This is Ridge Runner. Copy that. What's your situation? You hurt? Over. Silence followed, just the hiss of white noise and rain hammering the roof. I waited, heart ticking up a notch. Breakdowns in these hills could turn deadly quick with no cell signal and help hours away. The call repeated, almost identical. Breakdown at mile 217. Something's out here, but now it sounded distorted, like an old recording warped by time, the words slurring at the edges. Unsettled, I tried again. Lone Wolf, this is Ridge Runner. Location confirmed. Hold tight, I'm close. Over. More static, no response. Curiosity gnawed at me, mixed with that trucker's code. You don't ignore a call like that. Not when the mountains can swallow a manhole. Mile 217 was just ahead, a straight stretch with a pullout on the right, flanked by dense forest. I eased the rig slower, hazards flashing, peering through the rain-streaked glass. Lightning lit the scene in stark flashes. Empty pavement, no vehicle in sight, just puddles rippling under the downpour and wind howling through the trees. No breakdown, no flares, nothing. I pulled over anyway, the truck's tires squelching in the mud along the shoulder. Killing the engine amplified the storm. The rain a relentless drum, thunder rumbling like a warning. I sat there a moment, listening, but the CB stayed silent now, as if it had never spoken. What the hell? I muttered, grabbing my rain slicker and a heavy flashlight from under the seat. Stepping out, the cold hit like a slap, water soaking my boots instant. The wind tugged at my jacket, carrying the scent of wet pine and ozone. I scanned the area, beam cutting through sheets of rain, illuminating the empty road and the tree line beyond. No truck, no car, just the guardrail bent slightly, as if from an old impact, and runoff streaming down the embankment. The call echoed in my head, that desperate tone pulling me like a hook. Maybe he'd wandered off, disoriented, or rolled into the ditch. Against the howl, I shouted, "Hello? Anyone out here? Wind swallowed the words. Then the CB in the cab blared again. I'd left the door cracked, the same voice pleading help. Can't see it, but it's close. Familiar yet off, like hearing your own echo in a cave. Unnerved, I swept the flashlight wider, light dancing over slick rocks and underbrush. That's when I spotted them. Footprints in the mud along the shoulder, fresh and deep, leading into the woods. Boot prints, size 12 maybe, pressed heavy as if the man had been running or dragging something. They vanished into the trees, where the forest thickened into a wall of dripping foliage. The rational part of me said turn back, call it in at the next station, let the rangers handle it. But that voice, the urgency, it tugged harder. I followed briefly, just a few yards in, boots sinking into the leaf litter, rain pattering on my hood. The woods were alive with sound. Branches creaking, water dripping, thunder distant now. Lightning flashed, silhouetting trunks like skeletal fingers. Deeper in, the footprints muddled, but I heard it. Branches snapping, close but invisible like something heavy moving through the undergrowth. Not a deer. Too deliberate, too near. My beam swung, catching nothing but swaying ferns and rain-glistened bark. The snaps came again, circling now from behind, then left. Heart racing, I backed up, light whipping wild. Who's there? No answer, just the storm and that unseen presence, patient in the dark. Panic bloomed slow, a chill deeper than the rain. I bolted back to the road, slipping once in the mud, flashlight beam bobbing. Scrambling into the cab, I slammed the door, water pooling on the floor mats. Breath ragged. I keyed the ignition, the engine turning over with a cough before roaring. The radio blared once more as I peeled out. Don't leave, it's coming for you too. The voice sharper now, accusatory, cutting through the static like a knife. I floored it, rig lurching forward, tires spinning briefly before gripping. Rain hammered harder, visibility near zero, but I didn't care, had to put distance between me and that mile marker. For the next hour, the calls persisted, intermittent but growing personal. Wytheville, your ma's house on Elm Street, the boys Tim and Cody. My hometown, my family, details no stranger could know. Ma still lived in that old clabber place, Tim working the garage, Cody off at college. How? The voice warped further, pleading turning to whispers. It's here for you. Static laced with sobs, or maybe laughter. Hard to tell through the distortion. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, mind racing. Hallucination? Prank? But the storm raged on, lightning illuminating empty road behind in the mirrors. No pursuit, just the endless black. The calls mention more. My divorce last year, the empty bed waiting back home. Regrets I'd buried deep. Dread built like the pressure before thunder. Quiet desperation seeping in. I tried other channels, but every one echoed the same transmission, looping with variations that hit too close. Don't answer, but you did. Finally, as the sky lightened in the east, dawn breaking through ragged clouds, the radio faded, static softening to silence, the voice dissolving like mist burned away. I pulled over at the first diner past the state line, a rundown spot with fogged windows and the smell of bacon grease. Legs shaky, I stumbled in, ordering coffee with hands that trembled. The place was half empty, locals in flannel nursing mugs, eyes squinting at the rain-streaked glass. After a bit, I mentioned it casual-like to the cook flipping eggs. He paused, spatula hovering. Mile 217? Yeah, old story. Trucker vanished there about 15 years back. Storm like this one. Last call matched what you heard. Breakdown, something out there. Search found his rig empty. Door open, footprints into the woods. Never found him. Folks say storms stir it up, his echo calling out, drawing others in. The waitress nodded, refilling my cup. Unresolved, they call it. Like the mountains hold onto the lost, replaying their desperation. I didn't dismiss it. The voice clung, a phantom in my thoughts. Drove the rest of the way numb, unloading in Roanoke on autopilot. Back home, I researched online forums, old news clips confirming the tale. A driver named Harlan Reed disappeared in a squall, transmission logged but unanswered. His words mirrored mine, down to the plea. The Parkway's storms awaken more than weather. They rouse echoes of the vanished, pulling you into their quiet desperation with familiar lures. Now, every crackle on the CB sets my teeth on edge, every storm cloud a harbinger. That phantom haunts my drives, lingering in the static like unresolved pleas from the void. Some calls aren't meant to be answered, but once heard, they never truly fade, whispering from the hollows when the rain falls heavy. Story 8. The crisp autumn evening wrapped the Blue Ridge Parkway in a golden haze, leaves fluttering like confetti in the dying light as my truck wound through tunnels of overhanging branches. I've been hauling loads up and down these mountains for nigh on 12 years, ever since the textile mill in my hometown of Marion shuttered and left me with a mortgage and a hunger for the road. Trucking wasn't glamorous, long hours staring at asphalt, coffee turning to acid in your gut, but it paid the bills and gave me the solitude I craved after a messy divorce that still stung like an open wound. My rig was an old Freightliner, battle-scarred from countless runs, its engine a reliable rumble that drowned out the regrets. That day, I was carrying a shipment of hardware from Greenville to Boone, nails and tools rattling faintly in the trailer as I navigated the curves. The air had that sharp tang of falling leaves and distant wood smoke, the kind that makes you nostalgic for simpler times before the world got complicated. The Parkway's beauty turns eerie as the sun dips low, shadows lengthening across the ridges like fingers reaching from the valleys below. Tourists flock here in the fall, snapping photos at overlooks where the views stretch endless. But by evening, the road empties out, leaving you alone with the whisper of wind through the pines and the occasional hoot of an owl echoing off the cliffs. I left the last fuel stop around 4, tank full and thermos topped off, planning to push through to Boone before night fully claimed the hills. The radio played scratchy country tunes, songs about lost love and lonely highways that hit a little too close, but I kept it low, preferring the rhythm of tires on pavement. As the light faded to twilight, the golden-leaved tunnels grew dimmer, headlights flicking on to pierce the gathering dusk. That's when I first heard it, the footsteps. At first, it was subtle, a rhythmic crunch pacing alongside the trailer, deliberate and matching my speed. I figured hikers, maybe, folks out for an evening trek on one of the trails that crisscross the parkway, their boots hitting gravel on the shoulder. But glancing in the side mirror, the road was empty behind me, cliffs rising sheer on the left, drop-offs plunging into shadowed hollows on the right. No paths for walkers there, just unforgiving rock and void. I cocked my head, listening harder over the engine's hum. The steps continued, close like someone jogging parallel to the rig, soul striking earth in perfect sync. Unease prickled at the base of my skull, slow and insistent, but I shook it off. Ears play tricks on long hauls, especially when fatigue sets in. I slowed the truck a touch, dropping to 25, and the footsteps halted abrupt, leaving only the wind's sigh. Heart easing, I accelerated back to 35, and there they were again, resuming, rhythmic and near, echoing unnaturally through the cab as if amplified by the metal frame. The golden glow gave way to full dark, stars pricking the sky above the treetops, but down here in the curves, it felt like burrowing through a tunnel of night. I fiddled with the radio, switching to AM news to cut the quiet, but static overwhelmed the signal, hissing like breath on a cold window. The footsteps persisted, now seeming to come from both sides, a steady cadence that matched every rev of the engine. Dread built gradually, not a sudden spike, but a creeping chill, like fog rolling up from the valleys. Who, or what, could keep pace like that? No human could match a truck's speed on foot, not without tiring. Not in this terrain. I checked the mirrors again, beams catching only swaying branches and empty asphalt. The trailer rocked slightly on a bend, and for a moment, the steps seemed to falter, then sink back up, closer now, as if whatever made them was adapting, learning my rhythm. Miles ticked by, the parkway's isolation pressing in, heavy, unrelenting. No other vehicles passed. It was just me, the rig, and that persistent pacing. My mind wandered to stories I'd heard at truck stops, old-timers spinning yarns over greasy eggs about the restless souls haunting these hills. Miners lost in cave-ins, loggers claimed by the wild, wanderers who never made it home. I pushed the thoughts down, focusing on a road, but the sound gnawed at me, echoing in my chest like a second heartbeat. Up ahead, a vista point emerged, a wide pullout with a stone overlook, the kind where you can stare out at the layered ridges fading into blue. I eased the truck off the pavement, gravel crunching under tires, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, rain from earlier leaving the air damp and cool. The footsteps stopped with me, hanging in the quiet like an unfinished sentence. Grabbing my flashlight, a sturdy one with a beam that could cut through fog, I stepped out, boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. The night air nipped at my face, carrying the scent of wet leaves and earth. I circled the rig slow, lights sweeping the trailer's sides, the undercarriage, the wheels caked in mud from the day's drive. Nothing. No footprints in the dirt shoulder, no scuffs on the metal, just the ordinary grime of the road. The woods flanked the pullout, dense and dark, branches rustling faintly in the breeze. I shone the beam into the tree lean, half expecting eyes to reflect back, but only trunks and underbrush stared silent. Relief trickled in, tentative. Maybe it was an echo, tires kicking up gravel in some acoustic trick of the mountains. I lingered a moment, listening, nothing but the distant call of a whippoorwill, mournful in the night. Satisfied, or at least telling myself I was, I climbed back into the cab, slamming the door against the chill. As I settled into the seat, a shadow flitted in the periphery, quick, humanoid, darting behind the trailer in the side mirror. I spun, heart jolting, but it was gone when I focused, vanished like smoke in the wind. The cab felt colder now, the heater's warmth not touching the sudden goose flesh on my arms. I started the engine, the rumble a comfort, and pulled out slow, tires grinding gravel. Almost immediate, the footsteps resumed. Louder this time, pacing the trailer with that same deliberate rhythm. Dread resurged, thicker, wrapping around my thoughts like vines claiming an old fence. Driving on, the pacing intensified, now accompanied by faint knocks on the metal. Soft at first, like fingers tapping tentative, then firmer, as if testing for entry. Tap, 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 echoing through the frame, vibrating up my spine. I glanced back, mirrors showing only dark road, but the sound were undeniable, close as if whatever made them was right there, inches from steel. Panic simmered beneath the surface, slow brewing, my mind racing for explanations. Animals? Pranksters? But in these isolated stretches, with cliffs and drops, it didn't add up. The knocks grew insistent, rhythmic with the steps, and then came the whispers, muffled words filtering through the vents or the seals, unintelligible but urgent, like pleas from a bad dream. Not English, sure, or maybe they were slurred and faint. Wait, company, alone. My name slipped in once, Jesse, clear enough to freeze my blood. How? No one knew me out here. I'd driven solo for years, family scattered after the split. The whispers overlapped, insistent, pulling at memories I'd rather forget. The empty house in Marion, kids I saw only on weekends, regrets piling like fallen leaves. I blasted the horn, a long wail that shattered the night, echoing off the ridges like a cry for help. But it only amplified the echoes, the footsteps and knocks seeming to mock me, sinking with the blare before fading back to their steady haunt. The tunnel loomed ahead, a stone arch bored through the mountain, its mouth yawning black. I pushed the speed, rig groaning around the final curve, trailer swaying as I entered the dim passage. Lights flickered on the walls, wet from seeps, the air cooler and musty. The sounds peaked there, steps thundering, knocks pounding, whispers swelling to a chorus, then ceased abrupt at the tunnel's end, leaving a silence heavier than before, ringing in my ears like the aftermath of a gunshot. I didn't stop, driving hard through the remaining miles, heart pounding until Boone's lights twinkled ahead. Pulled into a truck stop, lot half empty under sodium lamps, and sat there shaking, coffee forgotten in my hand. That night clung to me, a quiet persistence that reshaped everything. At the diner counter the next morning, nursing hangover eggs, I mentioned it vague-like to the old-timers clustered around. They nodded slow, eyes knowing. Pacers, one grizzled vet said, voice low over his mug. Spirits of wanderers who hitched eternal rides. Lost souls from the old days. Loggers or miners seeking company in the lonely heights. They walk beside you, testing, whispering what you don't want to hear. No harm. Usually, just a reminder of the veil, thin as mist in these hills. The others murmured agreement, sharing tales of their own. Steps in the night, knocks unanswered, whispers fading at dawn. Mountains don't forget the restless, he added. Invite him to walk with the living, subtle-like. I tried shaking it, rerouting to flatter roads for a spell, but the pull of the parkway calls you back. Economics, familiarity. Now, every crisp autumn evening, that prickling returns, ears straining for footsteps in the quiet. The paths aren't just for the living. They cradle the unrest, inviting the pacers to stride beside, their steps a subtle echo of mortality's thin veil in those isolated stretches. And sometimes in the Rearview's glance or the wind's sigh, I wonder if they're still there, patient, waiting for the golden leaves to fall again, drawing me into their eternal wander with whispers I can't quite ignore.